Welcome to the show. This is the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast. This is where you get real clarity about retirement so you can build a plan that blesses your life instead of becoming it. We'll share what you need to hear to replace worry with confidence, protect what you've built, and actually live your dreams, not your fears in retirement. Let's dive in. Welcome to episode 4. Welcome to episode 4 of the Build Big, Live Bigger podcast. My name's Jonathan Burgess, your host. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Luke Maloney Grimes. So today we're going to be talking about how to fire your boss, the retirement edition. It's funny whenever we came up with that title, we have a cuss word here at Big Money. We got a couple cuss words internally. Boss is one of them.
Yes.
What do we say instead of boss?
Leader, right?
Coach.
I'm still getting the hang of it.
Yeah, it's okay. I catch people saying boss sometimes. I'm like, coach. Say coach. What's the other one? It's not employee, it's
Team member.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about verbiage. So it's a little bit against the big money. We used a cuss word in the title, which, if you're working a lot of people in the workforce, your boss, you do want to fire them. So we're going to talk about that. So how to retire. I've been really excited about this episode. I feel like if you're watching now, definitely hang on until the end because a lot of good ground is going to be able to be covered today. And we're going to try to give a lot of nuggets. So
I'm excited. Let's do it.
So we're going to talk about the 4 pillars: income, investments, taxes, and Social Security, how to set up a retirement income plan. Keep in mind, we don't know your specific situation, so we're going to be talking generally. We don't sign off on anything unless we're the ones implementing it. So, but we're going to try to give you as much usable advice today as we can. So, pillar 1, income. So let's talk about how to create a retirement income plan. So if you're looking, like, let's say somebody's like, this sounds great, Luke. I want to fire my boss right now. Where do I start? Well, you need to know what your income is. So if you were starting with a retiree and you could spend all the time in the world with them, where would you start?
So in the very beginning, when it comes to figuring out how to plan for the future, if you did want to fire your boss, you really need to have that income plan in place. It starts with income. You don't live on your investments, you live on income at the end of the day. So that's really number one. So figuring out what are the pieces in place that need to be there in order to have that income sustainably throughout retirement, and really starting to build from the ground up. So what sources do you already have? How much do you need to supplement from your investments? What type of investments will you take from? And really just determining the timeline, and also how much can you live on? That's a big question and a good question. And that's something that like us and our softwares can do to estimate how much can you live on. And so building a budget, making sure you stay within roughly that budget.
So how would you go about building a budget? Like, I think that's probably the first step. It's, nobody ever really wants to do it. It's not ideally how you would want to spend a night with your significant other, but
it's not the most fun thing to do.
But if you start with the vision in mind, hey, I want to fire my boss. I want to retire early. I think it's a little bit easier to do that. So if you're sitting down, let's age you a couple years, and let's say, you and Case Guy are sitting down to retire, how would you go through and determine what your budget is for retirement?
On the budgeting side of things, I would start by looking through the history of what we spend on. So like we'll go through our statements based on all of our different accounts. We'll total those up and see roughly what we've been living on. That's really the first place to start. If you want to break it down more, look at your major expenses and start there. And also, see what else in addition to that is, maybe not completely necessary, can be flexible, but is also there in terms of your total expenses. But again, going into retirement, it's really up to you, like how comfortable and how much do you want to live on. And again, it just comes back to your asset base, but always starting with what you're spending on currently, and projecting that moving forward.
Yeah, I would say in a perfect world, if I was dealing with a client who really wanted to retire, what they would do is they would print out their bank statement, their credit card statement, and you grab 2 highlighters. A green highlighter for needs. So, mortgage, if you still got, a lot of our clients don't have mortgage anymore, but mortgage, if you still got one, taxes, what are you paying annually? Or you having to pay quarterly tax payments? Those are usually somebody's biggest expenses, usually taxes, then mortgage. your needs like your cell phone bill, water bill, all those things. You highlight in green, and then you go through with a red pen, and you would do nights out to eat, date nights, maybe a luxury car that you have, and you have a car payment or whatever that is. But you go through and you highlight wants in red. So then at the end, what you do is you take both statements, a bank statement and a credit card statement, and you put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and you total up what those monthly expenses are between needs and wants. So that way you have a clear picture of what my monthly spend is. And then you can back into that. So, okay, every month my needs are $5,000 a month. My wants are $4,000 a month. That's, $9,000 a year, $108,000 a year is my goal. Can I retire? And then the next step is either you do it on your own or you find a professional advisor. Now, the thing about a professional advisor is when you bring them this budget, you need someone who tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. So a good advisor will say, hey, honestly, it would be really tough for you guys to live on $9,000 a month. You could live on $7,000 a month, and then you adjust. So you're either going to be able to retire now or you delay. That's, but a good advisor is going to tell you one or the other. But when you start building an income plan, the easiest thing to do is just say, okay, over the last 12 months, what have we spent? And today it's July, end of July. So you would go from July of 2024 to July of 2025. And then you determine your budget based off of those numbers, and you have a rough monthly spend. And in the best case, you'll be able to retire now, spend what you're spending now while you're working. But the thing that you have to look at too is every day is Saturday in retirement. So, what day of the week you spend the most amount of money? It's usually on a Saturday. So if you give yourself a 10 to 15% buffer above what you're already spending, that's usually a good
that's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point, because you're going to be much more, you have much more free time. You're going to be much more relaxed. You're going to be going out to dinner or lunches doing more, entertainment type of things. So
golf tee times are open. You're playing in the middle of the day.
Yeah. You want to build in that buffer for sure, just in case.
Yeah. So when you start with the income, that's the first piece. So we need to determine what the need is. Now you need to go into the investment plan, which is pillar 2. Now in pillar 2, what you're going to do is you're going to take that income plan, you're going to determine what your annual spend needs to be, and then now you need to create a portfolio that reflects the amount of money that you want to spend every year. So before we get to the investment side, so what you do is you have your annual spend now, and you subtract guaranteed sources of income. Maybe you have a pension, an annuity that you've been deferring, or Social Security, one of those three. And you're going to factor that in. What you don't factor into the income side is you want guaranteed sources to determine what your income gap is. You don't want to run it based on dividends, because if you include dividends as a guaranteed source of income, it's not really a guaranteed source, right? Companies can cut dividends. So you take total income need minus guaranteed sources of income. That gives you your gap, and that's what you need to build your portfolio off of. So if we're looking at investments, walk through the prudent investment rule or prudent investor rule for the folks listening. How should you set up a portfolio? Let's say if you're 61 years old and you want to retire at 62.
Yeah,
what's the right mix?
Before we get to that, do you mind if we spend a little more time on that income piece? Because I had a couple more things I might want to go through there. So I really sympathize with people on the budgeting side, because it's not really a fun thing to do. But it really is the number one thing you need to know is how much do you spend consistently? Have you ever heard of that book, Atomic Habits by James Clear?
Yeah. Oh, I've read it 3 times. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite books. And it's basically about building good, consistent habits for success. And, some of the keys about building those right habits are, making the good habits easy, simple, clear, and there's a clear trigger as well. My goal in terms of budgeting, at least to be able to know my expenses and how much I'm spending, is to make it easy and make it simple. And so sometimes that does require softwares or apps as well. So finding a way to make it really simple and easy for you to keep up with what you're spending, I think that's really important. A lot of the time it's not very fun to go through all of your statements and like try and figure out what you are spending. It's a great exercise, but if you do want to make it easier and simpler, you can also try and lean on some apps or some softwares to make it really easy. Like me, have you ever used Monarch before?
I have not, but I've used something similar called Cube before.
Does that one work?
So it's the same thing. It's going to categorize your expenses. You connect your credit card login and your bank login, and then it's going to categorize everything and tell you roughly what your monthly spend is. But some of them will be uncategorized, so you have to go in and manually categorize them. But things like a water bill, mortgage, all of that stuff is going to automatically pull in. Okay. So if you're a little bit more astute to technology, then it's a good idea to use an app. Yeah. I know a lot of our clients who were a little bit older.
It's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, the printing off of the bank statements and credit card statements is going to be the route that they go. But if you're a little bit younger or you really get on the computer, an app is a quick hack.
Yeah, 100%. And the one that I use is Monarch. We're not affiliated with any apps at all. It's just the one that I use. We don't get paid for you going and downloading these. But I've linked all of my, credit cards, bank accounts, whatever it may be, to this app, and it basically aggregates all of those expenses and incomes into one ledger, and it will show you some charts of how you're tracking throughout the month to month. And at least I'll be able to see roughly what I'm spending and making on a consistent basis. And at least I have, a live, up-to-date feed of what's happening. So that helps me a lot, but I know that not everyone likes technology and like figuring out those apps. So I understand, but finding just a way that makes it easy, simple, and consistent, as long as you can keep up with those incomes and expenses, that's important, because going into retirement, like you said, you want to figure out that gap between what you want to live on and your expenses. And if you need to supplement from your investments, then we move into the investment piece. How are you going to supplement from your investments? And so again, back to your question, going into retirement, a lot of the time, or majority of the time, if you need to supplement from investments, which most people do, you want to have the safe sources there to take from. So again, we're stacking and building up from the ground up, from that income and from that expense need, or the lifestyle need.
I would say I've seen the negative side of this when someone doesn't actually do this. You've heard of Keeping Up with the Joneses?
Yes.
Before. I had a client who was not a client before they came on with us. Anyway, they came to the office. They had some friends who were much wealthier than they were. And it doesn't matter what amount you've saved. It matters about your goal, right? I think treating everyone the same. We don't necessarily look at it from a dollar amount. We just say the minimum to work with us is a willingness to be helped. Ideally, they have enough assets, and if we're not the right fit, we'll turn them away. But there was a client, they had some wealthy friends. They loved to golf, and all their friends had nice cars. Well, the year that they retired, they went out and bought 2 luxury SUVs at the same time, and just spent an insane amount of money traveling with their friends who were very wealthy. But anyway, they depleted about a third of their retirement savings in 12 months.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think there's got to be a layer of contentment when you retire. Like you have to know what your spending goal is, and you also have to know, what's reasonable. And a good advisor will try to talk you off the ledge if you're going and doing anything like that.
You need to find a sweet spot, because some people are very anxious and scared to spend in retirement. We've seen that a whole lot, but some people are almost too overconfident as well. So you don't want to be on either side. You want to be somewhere in that sweet spot where you can have a good lifestyle, but you're not overspending to deplete your money too soon.
Yeah. So I think just having that mix, but that's step 1. You got to know your budget. So step 2, how do you build the investment portfolio? Talk about prudent investor rule a little bit. Let's say, retirees got $1 million. They're 61. They want to retire at 62. What's the investment mix that they should look at just to know they have a layer of stability? That they're not going to have to worry about running out of money.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the rules of thumb that you can lean on and that we lean on sometimes for rough guidance is like that rule of 100. So whatever your age is, so basically go 100 minus what your age is, and that is basically how much you should be allocated to growth. and the rest ideally is allocated to safe income sources. But again, that's a rough guide, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, really. But again, that is a basic rule of thumb, because at least you'll have a lot of good, safe assets that are not going to go down, they're not going to crash, that you can access moving forward, but they're obviously going to, return as best as possible. But that's the beginning, the tip of the iceberg, the rough estimate. But again, it depends on your situation. So
I agree.
putting that into our softwares and trying to estimate how much income you have moving forward and how much your investments are projected to grow, etc.
I think that the way that you should look at that, if you're like, okay, well, does that apply to me? Does that not apply to me? If you had money coming in every month from like a pension, you can back down on the rule of 100. If you're planning on taking 4% per year from your portfolio, you kind of need to follow it pretty closely. So $1 million, let's say your gap to get you to, we're working with that same retiree. Their goal is $108,000 a year, $9,000 a month. If they were getting guaranteed income of, let's say, $68,000 a year, and they needed to take out $40,000 a year in income, well, $40,000 a year in income is 4% of $1 million. So they would need to follow that prudent investor rule pretty closely. Now, if, let's say, retirees got $1 million, they only want $80,000 a year in income, then they've got guaranteed income sources of $68,000 a year, then you can back down prudent investor rule. So you could put more money into the stock market. But if you're going to fall around that, and when we say the 4% rule, can you just explain what that is for general rule of thumb?
That's another great rule of thumb, is the rule of 4%. And it's been pretty popular in finance and investing circles, and it's great for retirement planning as well. But essentially, if you're taking from your investments more than 4% consistently from your portfolio, it might be a warning sign that you may run out of money too soon. Because essentially, if you can have a portfolio that's roughly growing at, let's just say 4, 5, 6, 7%, maybe somewhere around there, you could take 4% quite consistently while that portfolio is growing with inflation as well. So inflation is that extra 3%, so totaling 7%. Those 4%, if you're going over that, it may not last forever. Again, you want to build it into the plan and run it through our softwares. But yeah, that's where the 4% rule comes in. If you're taking more, it might be a warning sign, but taking less than that is, more on the safe side.
Yeah. Well, I think if you were taking more than 4 and you just had a level income plan, which I hate to say it, but a lot of advisors do that. They're like, hey, you can retire. We're not going to adjust for inflation. Those are the retirees who, when inflation starts to hit big time, they start to feel it. And it's because they're not following that 4% rule. You really need to follow that so you can keep up with inflation over time. Okay, so the split for investments, ideally, if you need to take out 4% per year out of your portfolio, you're following the prudent investor rule. So you need to have 61 to 62% of your portfolio in safe assets, your age, and then the remainder of it can be in the stock market. So when we're looking at something to use for, let's talk about the income piece first. When we're talking about something to use for income, what should be your target rate of return that you're shooting for on the income side?
Well, on the income side, obviously, again, you have your cash bucket for safety and liquidity, and then you have your safe income bucket, which is what we're talking about, and you also have growth. On growth, you can be a lot more aggressive. You want higher returns, but in the middle, the safe income bucket, we have, really interesting and quite genius solutions to that. But we've been able to see returns in the range of 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So that's actually really good for safe income.
Yeah. I think the tendency for a lot of retirees is to either use money market, which you should for that cash bucket, like you need some expenses that are on the side, or you need a bucket for emergency expenses. But in general, you don't have to make 4%. You can make more than that. It's just all about finding something that has that true safety intertwined with it. So shooting between 6 to 8% is really where you should aim in a high interest rate environment. And then on the growth side, This is my view if you're younger. It's not the view of a retiree. My view for somebody like you and I is do something where if you're right, you get rich. If you're wrong, you don't go broke. That's not the retiree mantra at all. It's not about how much money you make. It's about how much money you keep. So, in general, the three things in your control are the risk you take, the fees you pay, and the taxes that you pay on the growth side. So fees, obviously we should do everything. Like if you're thinking about what you should rely on to grow in the stock market, your growth portion of your assets, you try to drive fees down as much as possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is diversification. You need to make sure that your money is split across a ton of different asset classes. So non-correlated assets is ideally, that's what you want to shoot for in the growth bucket. So that means that when you're building a portfolio, if something zigs with the market, let's say it goes down, you should have something else that zags and goes up, just to create, to keep that as simple as possible. But you want to do that through low cost investments.
Yeah, totally. And that's where the stability comes from. Because if everything is completely correlated and it all goes down at once, and you're supplementing from that growth bucket, if that was to happen, you're going through it much faster. You're depleting it a whole lot faster. So if there's non-correlation in that portfolio, overall it's much more stable and a lot more of a reliable income source.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we do that's slightly different is we choose to only build clients on the growth portion of their assets. It's a little bit different as a philosophy, but whenever we do that, essentially what it allows them to do is the majority of their assets that are safe, they're not seeing a fee reduction on those. So, if it's producing 6 to 8%, it's a true 6 to 8% going to the client. Whereas on the growth side, they're being charged a fee, and we have a larger internal rate of return target. But what should a retiree shoot for as far as a growth number, like on the growth portion of their assets, net of fees? Like what should you be targeting? What rate of return?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I can give some context. So the S&P 500 since inception, which is really the highest quality index fund that we know of, or the highest quality index that we know of, since 1957, it's averaged 10.4% year, until now, which is July 2025.
Yep.
So that's pretty good, and it's especially over long periods of time. So minus, let's just say on average, a 1% fee or whatever it may be, that's about 9. But again, we on the investment committee try to target better than that. So we'll try, and a lot of it is weighted to the market, which is likely to do well, especially in America moving forward. But we also want to take on strategies that are going to do better. And that's what we work on constantly on the investment committee. So really being happy long-term with around 8, 9, 10%, I think that's a pretty good range. Again, that's a long-term average. So that's like over a 10-year, 5, 10, 15-year span. So sometimes the market might go up 30% and then drop 30%.
Yeah.
It's not going to look like that even 9% every year. But over a long period, it'll look more so like an average of 8, 9, 10, potentially and hopefully better.
Yeah.
If retirement clarity matters to you, don't wait. Text BOOK to 864-920-3155 or click the link in the description below to get a free copy of Jonathan's book, Retire Right.
Well, I think one of the things that we look at is if you're limiting fees, risk, and the amount you pay in taxes, ETFs do a really good job of doing all three of those things. So index funds, you pay low management costs because it's basically a computer algorithm that determines what's in that portfolio, and it's a factual computer algorithm. It's not a opinion based. So costs are limited a lot more. And then the other thing is to drive a higher outsized rate of return, we will include individual equities in a portfolio that we really believe in. So when I say individual equities, I mean stocks. So an individual stock. So you know, an average portfolio that you would see from a professional advisor would have a lot of those ETF components as the base of the growth portion of the assets, the index funds. But then layered on top of that, you're purchasing individual equities that you really believe in. And ideally, those individual equities that you buy, you know them. So it's a place that you shop. on a regular basis, like a Costco, like an Amazon, like Apple. So when we're building those portfolios on the back end, we're not only using the index funds to drive growth, but also individual equities that we believe will achieve outsized returns. And that's proven to be true. Like if you look at the average rate of return across all of our portfolios, we can go in, click a little magnifying glass icon, and the individual equities that we're buying are usually performing a bit better than the underlying index funds, but the index funds are providing that stable base where you don't have to worry about, us trying to pick some individual equity, nor are we going in there every day and trading it. We're like, okay, if we're buying this, we're planning on holding on to it for 10 years, that individual stock, and that limits taxes. So when you buy the ETFs and the individual stocks, as long as you have a buy and hold strategy throughout the year, you're not generating taxes. Whereas a lot of retirees will go in, they'll hire an advisor, buy a commission-based mutual fund. Now you're getting hit with fees big time because you're having to pay a sales load to go into it. Not only that, now you have somebody trying to time the market for you, which is dangerous because mutual funds fail to outperform their benchmarks 92% of the time. And now you have an advisory fee on top of that. So you paid a sales load to go into it. You're paying the advisor to manage it. I call that a double dip account. And then now you have to believe that the money manager that you're also paying for is going to beat the underlying index, which they fail to do 92% of the time.
Yeah, it's unlikely they're gonna do better than the market if it's a short-term trading strategy, which a lot of the time it is at these mutual funds. So they're getting in and out of these stocks constantly throughout the year and throughout the years. So like a quote that Warren Buffett has is that essentially in the short term, the market is a voting machine, and in the long term, it's a weighing machine. And most of the time, mutual fund managers are really trading on that short term. We don't know what's going to happen in the short term, but over a long period of time with really high quality companies that we know are going to succeed over the next 10 or 20 years, I mean, that's where you have high conviction and outperformance as opposed to constantly trading.
Yeah. And I think one of the best metrics, and this is not, we're trying to give as much information as possible in this, but I'm going to go into a little bit of testimonial mode. I think that a large reason why we have a 99% retention rate with clients literally is around that investment philosophy. Don't charge them on the income side. They're producing 6 to 8% there. And then on the equity side, they're doing extremely well, and they're only charging an advisor, or they're only being charged an advisory fee on that side, which is why I think our retention rate is so good. But I think those two philosophies have served our clients really, really well. Us not trying to time the market, and then on the safe side of their assets, they know that there's you can't say guarantee in our world, but a lot of the products that we use have guarantee in the language on the safe side.
It's about as close as you can get really to safety and guaranteedness, I guess.
Yeah, but whatever you're going into, an advisor will walk you through if that investment product or that insurance product has a layer of guarantees. And I think using that hybrid approach where you say, okay, the safe money, we're going to get something that has a layer of that principal protection. And then on the growth side, obviously there's no guarantees, right? Stock market goes up and down every day, but you're buying stuff that you really believe in, and then you're only being charged a management fee on that side. So you're limiting expenses a ton. I mean, I think the average client who has over $1 million is around 0.5%. I mean, we may have some who are closer to 0.6, but I think that is an unspoken thing by a lot of advisors, because most of them are either buying commission-based mutual funds and charging on those. Not only that, they're buying commission-based bond funds or income funds. So now you're limiting your return there extremely, and it's tied to the stock market. So, okay, that brings us to taxes, because that is totally in your control. So how to fire your boss. You need to know what your budget is. You need to know how you're going to set up your portfolio. Third thing is you need to know how your tax situation is going to look. A lot of people think that they're going to pay less in taxes. I think one of the common traps that retirees fall into is they don't think their Social Security is going to be taxed. They're like, I already paid tax. Well, no, actually, if you're a retiree with any means, and you're making, 60, 70 grand a year in retirement, usually about 85% of your Social Security is going to be taxable. So what doesn't make Social Security taxable? Roth. If you're taking distributions from Roth every year, then your Social Security is in turn it doesn't count towards the Social Security tax calculation. So that's one thing that you can look at. And if you don't know what a Roth IRA is, a Roth IRA is the same thing as a traditional IRA. You just pay taxes on the front end, and then that money grows tax-free. Now, a lot of folks that we've talked to in the past think that because they have never done a Roth, they're essentially phased out. They're like, yeah, that was a good idea, but I never took advantage of it. But you can actually take advantage of Roth now through something called a Roth conversion. And that's through, if you have a 401k at work, still, you can actually do internal Roth conversions on your 401k at work while you're still working. Or if you're retired and you have a lot of money in a traditional IRA, 403B, simple IRA, SEP IRA, whatever it may be, you can actually take that money that's in that account today, pay taxes on it today, and let it grow tax-free in the future. So let's talk about tax planning a little bit, and then how do we make the decision of what to convert to Roth each year. So if you want to give kind of a high-level overview of if you're wanting to create a tax plan in retirement, what are the things that you should be looking at to do those Roth conversions?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as we know, we have Chris on staff who is a tax expert. He's fantastic at what he does. He worked at a CPA firm for like 20 years. So he knows all the ins and outs of the tax code. But essentially when it comes to Roth conversions, I mean, we want to put into this tax-free bucket as much as possible, as soon as possible, ideally, because once it's in there, yes, it can grow tax-free like an IRA, but when you take it out, there's no tax ever again. So when you take it out in retirement, or when your kids take it out, when they eventually inherit that money, they don't have to pay any tax burden as well. Yeah. So again, ideally, put it in there as soon as possible, but there's a few caveats. We want to know that when you take the money out of IRA and it goes into that Roth account, when you take it out of IRA, that is regular, ordinary income. Yeah. So that is going to be incurring taxes. It's going to be increasing your income, and that'll be pushing you up into potentially a higher tax bracket. So we want to take out not too much so that it fits into that tax bracket, whatever you're comfortable in terms of paying taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we call that the tax freedom ladder. So you know how you may have heard laddering CDs where you'll buy CDs with different maturity dates. That's a common strategy used by private banks. You can do a similar thing. You can ladder Roth conversions. So, you may have heard the adage, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Same thing on Roth conversions. It's not, there have been some folks in the past that I've seen who have heard about Roth conversions. They're like, heck yeah, that sounds great. They'll go convert $1 million IRA to Roth.
Too much all of a sudden.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you're in the highest tax bracket. It's happening all at once, and that's going to be a big tax burden.
Yeah. So, you can, number one, you push yourself into the 37% tax bracket, which is no bueno. So 37% of your IRA is now eaten up in taxes. The second thing is there's something called IRMA, which is the health insurance limits through Medicare. If you convert too much to Roth, you not only pay taxes on that money, it pushes you into a higher IRMA bracket. So your Medicare premiums can go up by $400 a month on each spouse. Well, it's more than $400 a month on each spouse. So now you incurred a $10,000 a year expense for 2 years. It costs you an extra $20,000 on top of the tax bill you already paid. So I think there's a couple things that you can look at around tax planning. Number one, it's how can we do systematic Roth conversions? We call it the tax freedom ladder here, but how can we do systematic Roth conversions each year to slowly convert this traditional IRA to Roth over time? Totally feasible that any American household can do that. You just have to go in and look at your tax bracket and know that you are going to bump that tax bracket, not bump into it. So if my next tax break is at $206,000 and we made $140 this year, then you can convert $60,000 to Roth without bumping yourself in the next tax bracket. Now you only pay taxes in that higher tax bracket on whatever is over that $200,000 because taxes they work in brackets. So that's one thing. You can do systematic Roth conversions where you bump the bracket, not go into the bracket. And then the next thing is you have to look at the IRMA limits if you're Medicare age. So if you're 65 and older, or you're 63, because they're going to look back 2 years to determine what your IRMA limits are. So this is extremely relevant if you're 63 and older. So make sure that you look not only at the tax brackets, you look at the IRMA brackets before you go in and you do a Roth conversion, because that's going to save you a surprise whenever you go to, you look at your Social Security and your Medicare, or however you're paying your Medicare premiums, they go up. So make sure you look at the tax brackets and the IRMA limits whenever you go in and you do a Roth conversion. The second thing is, since I'm on the side of health insurance, so I just want to hit on this really quick. A lot of retirees from 60, if they retire early from 60 to 65, they'll go into Obamacare. If you've saved over $1 million, there are investments that you can go into to plan for those health insurance expenses to get your income down. I know we will use that every so often. A client who's saved over $1 million, you can actually go and do tax advantaged investments where you drive your income down, where you don't have those Obamacare surcharges from 60 to 65. So that's also something that you want to look at if you want to retire early and fire your boss. You need to say, okay, what am I going to pay health insurance premiums through Obamacare? And is there any way that I can lower my overall income for the year to not have to get any of those surcharges? So that's another thing on taxes. Also, one last bit here on the tax space. You can do simple things like tax loss harvesting. So a good advisor, they're going to use down markets in two ways. They'll use them for Roth conversions, and they'll use them for tax loss harvesting. So for tax loss harvesting, if you have an individual stock, let's say you bought Apple, and, at the beginning of the year, we saw Apple drop. A good advisor would go in and sell and immediately buy that security back simultaneously. So, let's say you became a client in January of 2025, and then in February, obviously, we had this big dip. You can go in and you can click and tax loss harvest, and you could sell, Apple and maybe incur a $10,000 loss, but simultaneously, you're buying right back into that stock. And then you're not getting out of it, but for 5-10 minutes. And then you get the tax benefits at the end of the year, even though the market may have turned around by the end of the year, and you did the tax loss harvest at the beginning of the year, you're still going to get that write off on your taxes, which is capped at, $3,000 loss that you can carry forward. But hey, anything helps.
And something.
Yeah. So that's the tax side. And then also Roth conversions, you can do the same thing. I know one thing that we have talked about with Chris is, if the market experiences a 20% pullback on the growth side of a client's assets, we can go in and knock out Roth conversions, and you pay 80 cents on the dollar for a Roth conversion if you do it in a down market. So there are proactive things that you can do for tax planning, like simply having a tax plan every year to know how you're going to convert to Roth. That's proactive. Reactive is the market takes a downturn. You take lemons, you turn them into lemonade, you go and you do a Roth conversion. That's a great idea to do in a down market.
I like that idea of converting to Roth when the market has pulled back a lot, because ultimately when the market has shrunken that way, you're able to fit more of the shares that you own into Roth. So you're getting it in there, and then it can continue to grow. Yeah. So it's a good moment to take advantage of.
Yeah, and I would say you just need to determine that with your advisor, or if you do it yourself, you say, okay, if the market has a 20% pullback, I'm going to do some conversions. If it has a 50% pullback, I'm getting hyper aggressive. So just determining what those break points are. I know we have those internally around 20%, but and then even more at 30, 40, and 50. But if you don't have a tax plan, the IRS does.
That's right.
So you need to make sure that you're astute on the tax side, or that you've hired someone who they're astute at the tax side, so you don't have to worry about it. So that's taxes. It's not what you make, it's what you keep. So, and then we have pillar 4, which is Social Security. Now, Social Security is one of the largest sources of income for retirees, and I know you're a National Social Security accredited advisor. So if you want to hit on the Social Security side, I know timing's everything as it pertains to Social Security. So walk us through what should be some considerations that you make whenever you're determining when you draw Social Security.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a few basic aspects of taking from Social Security, when to take from it. It is a big decision. A lot of people see it as, it's this tempting, very immediate income source that they can get at 62. And a lot of people take it without even thinking about the repercussions, because there are a lot of aspects in terms of when you take and how much you're going to get. So you can start taking Social Security between 62 and 70. So where in that range should I take? That's question number one. So your full retirement age, which is most likely to be 67, it depends on your age, that is really supposed to be 100% of your benefit. If you wait longer than that, up until 70, the benefit that you get increases, and that's a permanent increase.
It increases by 8% from 67 to 70 each year?
Yeah, so it's about 8%. It is about 8% per year that you wait after full retirement age. So that could be a total of a 24% increase in your benefit if you wait until 70.
Compounded.
Yeah, so then you get that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So that's a great increase, and it's specifically 0.2% increase per month that you delay. So that's the exact amount.
I'm glad you got that accreditation.
Yeah. So, but if you take beforehand, before your full retirement age of 67, likely to be 67, it depends on your age, the 36 months prior, it is a 5/9 reduction in your benefit, 5/9 percentage reduction in your benefit per month that you take early. And then
that is extremely specific. It's about 5% per year, though, right? From 62 to 67.
Yeah, I know. I need to break it down to more of a human level.
Yeah.
But yes, every year that you're taking early, it's about a 5 to 6% reduction. So if you take all the way at 62 as early as possible, that's a 30% reduction.
Yeah.
And on top of that, if you take earlier than your full retirement age, every dollar that you personally make over $23,400 as of 2025, every dollar you make above that, it starts to half your Social Security benefit.
And that's only for earned income, though.
Yes.
Yeah. So that if you're pulling from your IRAs or 401ks, it doesn't matter. But if you are pulling, or if you're getting earned income, like let's say you retire at 63, the boss that you fired at 62 calls you back and says, hey, we want to get you in for contract work. We're going to hire you as a consultant. If you go in and they're paying you, $60 an hour, and you end up making $30,000, then that $7,000 that you made over that, your benefit of Social Security, you're going to get roughly a $3,500 penalty, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to be wary if you decide to go back to work early. I would negotiate that they pay you $10.99 and then you write off mileage and stuff like that. So you try to get it down to the $23,400. But if you're going to go back and they're going to pay you W-2, then you either need to pause Social Security or you need to figure something out. So
it's especially important to know before full retirement age, those two things. Am I making over the income limit for the Social Security benefit? But also just know that it's going to be reduced off the bat when you take early. So It could be reduced by 30% if you take it 62, but also reduced even further if you're making too much in earned income.
Yeah. And the two ways so to break this down as generally as possible, if you have the means and you've saved enough and your goal is reasonable, you want to delay. So if you have the money, you have the means, you want to delay to 70. If you don't have the money for your goal, you need to take Social Security. And the way that we look at it is, even if we were having a client delay and they had the means, if the market were to pull back or something changed materially in their plan, choosing to defer gives you a lever that you can pull, kind of like a parachute, right? You start falling too fast, you got a backup parachute. You deploy your first parachute, it breaks. You got a second parachute you can pull in Social Security. Go ahead and start getting that income if anything were to happen in the market. So I'm always a fan of deferring if we can, because it gives us another planning measure that we can rip that cord and give the client a buffer in the middle of retirement.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So Social Security is extremely important. It drives a lot of retirees' income, and determining when you pay it, I think It's like 80% of people take it as soon as it's a crazy number of people who take it as soon as they can because they don't think the system's going to be around. But there's 3 things that I think will happen before Social Security goes away. Number 1, they'll raise the age. So they may raise it from 62 is the earliest, so you can draw it to 64. I don't think that will happen for anybody who's in their 60s. It may happen to somebody who's in their mid-50s. So that's the first thing. They could raise the age. They'll also subsequently change the full retirement age, I believe, from 67 to 70 if they were to do that. And then you could delay as late as, let's say, 72. Totally reasonable that the Social Security system would do that. The other thing is I think they may do means testing at some point. They always try to villainize the rich. So, it may not happen in this presidential term, but in the next presidential term or potentially the ones following, you could have somebody come in and say, okay, if you've saved $6 million, $7 million, and they have a record of what you have based on your RMD. If you've saved, $6 million plus in a retirement account, they could say, hey, you're not eligible for Social Security. You're self-sustaining. You saved enough. So I think means testing could come in. They would delay the early retirement age and they would delay full retirement age and the latest that you could draw it. But I think that is probably the only thing that could happen in most of our clients' lives who were approaching retirement, maybe 55 plus. If you're younger than 55, I think that Social Security being around should be a concern that you have. And you should really factor in, okay, maybe it won't be there.
Yeah.
For me, that's us being pessimistic, but.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't want to depend on it and completely rely on it. But also just remember that, so there's about getting close to a $3 trillion Social Security trust fund, essentially, that funds these payments. But revenues that are going into that trust fund are consistently coming from income taxes. So let's just say that the fund did run out in the future, a worst case scenario, if that did happen in the next decade or two. Even with those revenues that are going into that fund, statistically, you should still get maybe around 70 to 80% of your benefit predicted moving forward just from those tax revenues.
Yeah.
So at least you have, a little bit of assurance knowing it's likely going to be there, but I wouldn't want to depend on it.
Yeah. And I think that the folks who are already drawing it, you have to think about the negative ramifications if they ever came out and said, we're reducing Social Security. That would cause an uproar. So that's why I'm saying I think our clients who are 55 and older don't have a ton to worry about. If you're 60 and older, yeah, it should be marginal. If you're already drawing Social Security, I don't even think it should be something that you worry about. But that covers all 4 pillars. So, get a budget. Determine what your annual spend needs to be so you can fire your boss. Set up your investment portfolio so you're not sweating every night. A lot of folks will go into retirement with 100% equities. And because of that, that can drive a lot of overspending. They could say, hey, I made 30% this year. Let me go out and buy that new car. Let me go out and do XYZ. But in reality, it's 10% annualized.
And you're exposed to unnecessary risk.
Yeah. So, dial back your risk as you're going into retirement. You don't have the same amount of time to recover. That's a general rule. We want you to be able to sleep at night. So make sure your investment plan reflects your age and reflects your goal. Taxes, make sure you have a tax plan. If you don't, the IRS does. And then Social Security is one of your main sources of income. So make sure you have a Social Security plan. Don't fall into the trap of drawing early if you don't have to, because I think you should be assured that the government would raise taxes, which goes even further into why you need a tax plan. The government would raise taxes before they would eliminate Social Security. So, Luke, appreciate your input and your expertise on episode 4.
Been a pleasure.
You always do a great job. And if you're curious about how this impacts you or your family, go pick up a copy of my book. I think Lindsay put some instructions on how to get a copy of the book in the podcast. And as always, build big, live bigger, build something that blesses your life, doesn't become your life. And we'll catch you on the next episode.